Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
And other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Mead.
And I'm Christy.
And in this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, well, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out,
but actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose.
Hello, my beautiful friend. It is Christy here. I am so excited to announce a very, very special gift that I am offering all gals who pre-order my book, Love Life Sober, a 40-day alcohol fast. I am going to be personally coaching you through this book for 6 weeks, starting September 30th in the But Jesus Drink Wine community. When you pre-order the book, you'll get a special invitation to join us for free for 3 months. That's a $72 value. Every single Monday, I'm going to coach you through this book so that you don't have to do this alone. That was the whole reason I wanted to write this book, is so that you wouldn't feel alone. You'll be able to gather with a group of like-minded women every single Monday, starting September 30th when you pre-order the book. There's a link in the show notes, and at that link, you'll find a place to pre-order the book, and you'll find a link to jump into the community for 3 months for free, which includes 6 weeks of coaching with yours truly through the book, Love Life Sober, a 40-day alcohol fast. I cannot wait to meet you. Now here's this week's episode. Hello, my beautiful friends.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Monday. We are so excited. I say that every time. I really need a new intro.
I know, but it's true. I
keep
am
it
real.
excited.
We are excited.
I'm really excited to welcome our new friend, Caroline Beidler, into the podcast studio today. Caroline is an author, recovery advocate, and founder of the storytelling platform Circle of Chairs. She is the author of Downstairs Church, Finding Hope in the Grit of Addiction and Trauma Recovery. And her latest book, You Are Not Your Trauma, Uproot Unhealthy Patterns, Heal the Family Tree, I love that so much, is out on the same day as my book. Yes. September 24th. She is passionate about leading women into greater healing, transformation, and recovery. With almost 20 years in leadership within social work and ministry, Caroline lives in Eastern Tennessee with her husband and her adorable 6-year-old twins. Hi, babe. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this. And I agree. I always say I'm so excited, but I mean it. But one time I did look up, I'm like, I should Google synonyms for excited. So thrilled, overjoyed, pumped. So I try to do that sometimes too. Because people are like, do you feel anything but excitement ever? Quicker thing happening with you. So anyway, but no, I am excited to be here.
I think the word that we've looked up the synonym for the most is probably journey.
Journey.
Right?
Oh my gosh. Can we retire journey, please?
What are some synonyms to the word journey? I want to hear them.
Adventure, situation, journey.
Correct. I feel like a lot of them sound like they should have been in Lord of the Rings. I'm like, this is too intense.
Yeah. So we just fall back on journey. That's fine. It's fine.
Recovery does feel intense sometimes. I like that. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, I have the Lord of the Rings reference in the beginning of my new book. There you go.
Can I just say that I have loved reading your book? Is just so I had the privilege of being away last week for a little while with my husband while he was working, and which meant I got time to read all the things that I've been wanting to read. And I had multiple options and it kept coming back to your book, Caroline. It is so beautiful. The cover alone just is so inviting. I'm a big fan of birds. So the artwork on the front is beautiful, but really just your message in there I've really enjoyed it. So I'm excited to share it with our audience today. And everybody needs to get both of these books on September.
Thanks, babe. Yeah, and Caroline so sweetly has organized this really, really cool group of people that are all Christian authors. And we've had a couple meetings, and I'm just so grateful for you leading that group, because it's so nice to meet other people writing in this space. And yeah, thank you for doing that too.
Yeah, I found in life, recovery, and writing, a community is key. And so I found, and I just really felt moved to bring some of us together who are doing this work in our little silos. We're Christian, or maybe in recovery, or writing about recovery type topics like mental health, trauma, certainly, addiction. bringing us together. And yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to be coming from this. It's just wonderful getting to know you. And we have a book birthday. We share a book birthday, which
I
is
know.
amazing.
Only God does these crazy, wild, amazing
Mhm.
things, right?
Mhm. Very true. Very true.
Can you introduce yourself to our audience and just say like how you got started in all of this amazing work and just let us know a little bit more about you and your story?
Yeah. It's interesting with the question because a part of me hesitates to go back into some of the really gritty, hard, dark times because I love to stay so much in like where I am right now, which is living as a truly like redeemed woman from so much of the struggle that I've had. And I write a lot about some of those gritty experiences as you meet me, as Christy, if you've read a little bit of the book, I walk through some of those details and those hard things. I think basically just a little like, how did I get here? My life, like so many of us, started off in a really dark place. I had a lot of what I think modern social work psychology calls adverse childhood experiences, where, just some really hard things as a child. And I think really early on, folks around me who are modeling how do you exist in the world when hard things happen? How do you exist in the world when good things happen? I was given the message that we drink. We use substances to help us escape. We use substances to help us when things are hard. And so that message was ingrained. So when these bad things started happening to me as a child, and then later as a teen, as a result of my substance use and addiction, I was just put myself in some really vulnerable situations where it was like the trauma would happen and then I would just turn to substances to help escape and cope with what I was feeling. And it was just this cycle that kept repeating. And what I didn't realize at that time, which I again explore in the book some more, is how connected what was happening in my body, mind, and spirit because of the trauma that I had experienced. I was really self medicating and trying to find a coping solution. And for me, the coping solution that I discovered was substance use till I was full blown in addiction and it wasn't working for me. And that happened pretty quickly. I think I was very addicted to hard drugs by the time I was 15
Mm.
and had an overdose at 17 and was in and out of treatment in high school. And it started really young for me. That's where things started, and even saying it, sometimes it feels like I'm so removed from that person. Like, what a gift that we have the opportunity to start again, to write a new story, to be part of something new that God is doing, and that's what I'm walking in today. And so I feel very called to share that message with other people, specifically women. I feel very called to share these messages with faith communities because I've experienced my own healing, part of my healing through connecting with a faith community and recovery community. I love when those two communities come together. So, yeah, so that's a little bit more about me. I have a background also in social work. So, part of my recovery stories, I decided to go back to school they called me a alternative student, but really they just meant old. I was like the oldest in my class, but I loved graduate school. I had my backpack and I was like, my note paper, like a paper, and people were looking around. This old lady doing, but I went cool. I just really wanted to help people. And so the opportunity to really start writing, which is something I've always done. Even as a child, I had this dream that I was going to be an author. It's so wild that it took a while. It took like over 40 years, but God helped make that happen. And so today I get to help people by writing. I love connecting one on one with women specifically. I actually wrote an article that came out today, but I alluded to this like the best, most life giving, amazing things that I do today as a part of my recovery, no one knows about except the people who are like in my circle. Like, I don't write about those things. I do those things in secret a lot of those things aren't my stories to tell, but like that connecting with people in that way is just so life giving to me too. So, a little bit about me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here, babe. So good.
I love that you say in the book that healing is a choice. And so I think that's something that resonates deeply with us because we talk about just the stories that we tell ourselves so often. Like we have this narrative in our head, I have to do this or I have to do that, and then just switching to I get to do this lightens the way for us to have that choice. And something like healing from trauma or intergenerational trauma, which
Mm.
your book so beautifully talks through, I think sometimes we forget that it is a choice. It feels like something we have to do. Can
Mm.
you expand on what you mean by healing as a choice and the invitation in that?
Yeah. Oh, I love the word invitation connected with that because I feel like when I discovered healing is a choice, the world opened up for me. 'Cause for so long, I was operating from a place of not having agency. I felt like the world was just happening to me,
Yes.
that I couldn't be like an active participant in that,
Yes.
and that God really wanted to be and have a partnership with me, and that I could make decisions that were good for me, and I could say no, and I could have agency. And so when I discovered that, it was like this world opened up. And in recovery, I've learned, and in recovery for me means abstinence from alcohol and other drugs. I say that, but I'm like caffeine, but
Don't take my
um,
coffee. I've tried to
right,
give up the coffee multiple times and it doesn't
yeah.
work every
So,
time.
anyways, I think for all of us, but for and now I lost my train of thought. I
Sorry.
talking about coffee makes me wanna drink coffee. Might be an indication that I need to work on that. But no, with healing is a choice when having that agency and coming to understand that I can be a part of my healing journey. Um, I think is such an incredible message to share because so many women specifically, I do a lot of research for my day job that I have. I do other things besides writing, but researching the statistics on women who've experienced trauma, it's astronomical. And I would argue, like today, I think what 100% of us have experienced something traumatic and something hard. And so being able to fully believe that we can make the decision to heal and to learn things, to break free from some of the patterns that we have, and that also may be patterns from our family is just, it's important that we get there, that we get to that place of understanding that.
I feel like I didn't really realize that I had experienced trauma until I had found freedom from alcohol and I looked
Mm.
back, right, in the rear view and I'm like, "Oh, that's why that all shook out like that." So, can you talk a little bit about, like, the intersection of trauma and addiction? And also, I guess, how like, and you just said that we've all experienced some sort of it, so what
Mhm.
does that look like on a gradual scale? What about the gal that's listening who is like, "Oh, wait, was that trauma?" And because that's how I felt. I was like, now I know that it was definitely serious trauma, but when I was in it, I did not know. Can you talk a little bit about how they're related and why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have this kind of, and I know I have in the past thought trauma is something that only certain situations will qualify that. So if I like lived
Yes.
through a natural disaster, if I've experienced being in active combat, or for me, sexual violence, or some of these like things where you're like, oh, yeah, clearly that's a traumatic situation. But trauma exists on a spectrum, right? Just like substance use challenges can, and just so many other things where a traumatic experience could be being a family member and watching your loved one go through addiction and go through that process. It could be some of those like more horrific things, maybe losing a loved one. And it could also be just experiencing and walking with someone during a hard time. Trauma is really, it's something that happens, but more than that, it's how we respond to that, and everybody responds to hard things differently. And that has, I'm not a neuroscientist. I have some friends that are. One of our Christian writing friends, Dr. Lee Warren, could probably speak a little bit more intelligently about this. But we respond differently. So if something happens, it doesn't matter on what scale of like horrible it is. Our bodies and our minds and our spirits could be responding to that thing. And that in and of itself is a traumatic kind of cycle that we're living through. And so me, you mentioned in the book, I do talk about intergenerational trauma. And my mom actually has interludes throughout the book that she wrote that kind of are these little snippets of stories describing, without going into extreme detail, but some of the hard things that she's experienced. I didn't know as a child how significantly her trauma was impacting me, not just in the way she was able to show up for my brother and I or not show up when in the case of what happened there, but just how her own trauma symptoms were impacting me. I don't know. I want to say we've all lived through something really hard. We all have some type of trauma. Just turn on the news or don't, I guess, don't turn on the news. There's a
Mhm.
lot going on in the world today. And sometimes even that feels it's a type of trauma that we're starting to respond to. I know had to take times of breaking from social media or news because I start to feel like in my body, things happening like increased heart rate, my anxiety starts going up, I'm having trouble sleeping. My body is responding to that kind of external stimulus of that hard thing happening. So but anyways, I think it's an important question to ask, but I think when we can normalize the experience of what are we talking about? It's being human. When we can say it's okay to be human and to respond to hard things in our lives or in our families, but we have a choice. Our healing is a choice, and we can work and live in partnership with God to get to a better place to healing. I want to say healing journey, but I'm not going to use the word journey.
It's
Like
okay.
adventure, healing path, healing sure.
Yeah, I think that's something that was so freeing for me is, or one of the things that maybe kept me stuck in the over drinking cycle for so long was maybe like I couldn't claim trauma because I didn't have those big things that we would point to. And I can see how they both work together. As I gave this alcohol this tiny opening in my life, it was this just social thing that we all did or whatever. I can see how giving it that tiny opening and also not knowing that trauma can exist in a lot of different shapes and forms and the impact that those have on each other. It's almost like they just were working together. Can you speak more to that and how intergenerational trauma, that word is so hard to say for me, family trauma can keep us stuck, how that contributes to that cycle we get into with addiction or, yeah.
Yeah. And that's in my book. I really try to dig into that topic of intergenerational or family trauma. I know that word is tough. Um, in a way that hopefully is accessible because there's a
Yeah.
lot of research that's actually coming out about how impacted we are, even down to the cellular level, by our ancestors' experiences, which to me is just like mind blowing. Wow. But if you talk to someone, and you both may have this experience too, who struggled with addiction, whether that's alcoholism or whatever it is, you can talk to your parents or maybe grandparents or aunts, uncles, talk to a family member, and likely most of us have another family member who has struggled with addiction in our lineage. I don't think we understand necessarily how those patterns of like brokenness sometimes just creep through the branches of our family tree. And so what we're walking out, and again, this is a little trippy, what we're walking out could be things that our ancestors were struggling with. A lot of folks who are part of my audience wouldn't necessarily call themselves Christian. And you know what? I think that's okay. Like, I love speaking to people who identify as Christian and also who may be like, I'm not sure, but I'm seeking, but we can also talk about this concept of sin and how it has connected through our lineages and throughout scripture. There's clear ways that this is evident. When we understand that, I think for me, I can feel a little bogged down and, oh my gosh, this is like a curse. I have to deal with my stuff. What are you talking about? The good news is that when we know this, for me, it's a lot. I guess what's freeing for me is the thought that it's not just about my story. It's a bigger story. It's about my
Mhm.
family's story, but more than that, it's about God's story. So I can say
Mhm.
the issue has gone through the branches of my family tree. But what's amazing is that we have all been redeemed from these issues and this brokenness. We sometimes only need to make the choice to step out of that. And I really felt moved to write this book because I have two babies, my twins, Henrik and Violet. They're 6. What a blessing. I talk about being pregnant in the book and just what a miracle that was. But as I'm becoming a mother and as I'm a mother today, I look at them and I am so committed to them not having to live in the chains of sin and brokenness or whatever you want to call it that I've had to walk in. I want to break that for them. I want to be an active part of choosing healing my family tree moving forward. I feel this is what
That's
I
good.
feel moved to do. And I hope people also feel moved to do this after reading my book. But I look at them and I'm like, no, they can have a new story too. And they don't have to live what I've lived.
So good.
It is so good. And you know what? Why I love this so much is I feel like so many people in the addiction recovery, whatever you want to call it, space, lean one way or the other, where it's no, you are actually this is in your genes, this is in your blood, you don't have a choice, or the other way. And so it's so nice to be able to hold these two truths and honor them for what they are, which is facts, right? Like we had Jessica Leahy talking about how adolescence and the developing brain and alcohol and all that stuff on a few episodes ago. And her whole thing was the percentage of genes, and that it's not all of it, but it is some of it. And so it's just so important. It's so important. And I'm totally with you. Like every time I look at the kids, and I know you probably feel the same. I know you do. We just don't have to do it that way. And isn't that a blessing? We get to be different for our kiddos.
Yeah,
So good.
it is such a blessing, and we can walk that out, like, just the way we are living our lives as women in recovery today, we can model that and show them another way. Hey, when you are really struggling, when you have these temptations, I can't even imagine being an adolescent today, but when you have these hard things coming, my hope is that they will have the coping skills that are different. They will have the tools and the resources to be able to choose another way. Hopefully, they'll have the faith to be able to get through these things. I spoke with a youth group, which I love doing because, as I mentioned, a lot of my using and really hard stuff that happened early on for me. And so I love talking with high school students specifically. And I love asking questions too, more than talking. I learn a lot more that way. But I asked questions of the youth, and one of them was like, why do you think so many youth are using drugs and alcohol today? Because they were saying, like, look, we can't even go into the bathroom of our high school. Everyone's using
Yes.
drugs. Everyone's smoking. Everyone's
Oh my
whatever.
gosh.
Cannot even go to the bathroom without having taste.
Yes.
And they said the number one reason they think teens are using today is because of stress, because they're stressed. And what is stress but a response to something traumatic that you're experiencing? So we have a whole
Mm.
generation of kids who need to learn there is another way, who are not only fighting maybe this intergenerational stuff that's going on, but the stress of the world. And so we need to come together. I feel this is hopefully, I like to end my books on a call to action. But really a call to action to help be there for the next generation and to model and to walk out what it looks like to be able to deal with stress, to deal with trauma, but do it in a way that is healthy. And I hope my book provides some of those tips and practical strategies to help us be able to model that for the next generation.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I love that you talk about the 5 rhythms as these, when we choose healing and what this journey path adventure looks like, these 5 rhythms that can support us in that. And you go into great detail with kind of what that looks like in the book. Can you give us a little snippet of those 5 rhythms as we can empower our listeners?
Yeah, how about I'll talk about one.
Okay.
So then maybe folks will want to dive into the book a little
Yes, for
more.
sure.
But one that I think is so important to start with, and I've learned from personal experience, certainly, but so many of the women and people that I've worked with over the years have so many issues around boundaries. And so part of like how my trauma impacted me, you talk about agency. I felt like I literally had no agency. I was like someone else was directing the show and I was just an actor in the play and someone gave me the script. I had no active like participation. So if there was a guy even early into recovery at a recovery meeting who was like, look, I just got my fifth DUI, just got out of prison, no job, living in my parents' basement, no car. Hey, do you want to date? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my dream man. He wants to date me. I don't like you, but I'll date you because you like me. It sounds insane, but
No, it doesn't.
that was like how I lived my life. It was just happening to me. And so the
Mhm.
first rhythm is all about honoring the temple that is ourself, that is our body, that is, our person, and understanding that we have the ability to set boundaries. And how can we do that? So I talk about a little bit about assertive communication. And I also talk about coming to a place of understanding that we have value. So when I understood that myself as a person, and again, it to me, because I feel like I'm just such a new creation today, it's even hard to put myself into that place. But I truly did not understand that my body and person had value and worth. And the things that I did, the things that I allowed, desecrating the temple that is a temple of the Holy Spirit, the person that God formed and made. And so being able to talk to women and help women understand that. And paired with that, giving practical tools, assertive communication, and talking about what does it look like to have boundaries, I think is so important. So that was a little taste of how I
Mhm.
walked the first step. But I really try to have in my writing, it's a give and take and it's a movement. So I talk a lot in the book about a movement towards healing. I'm not going to just throw a bunch of solutions at someone. Like, I
Yeah.
want readers to experience through storytelling, through information, through examples. I want it to be an experience. And so I really hope that the rhythms do just that. Like, it's a movement. It's not a how-to guide, but it's a process that I'm hoping to go on together with the reader. And my mom and I actually are joking about this, but we are actively going through the book. When you write a book, as you both know, you write it, you edit it, it's a multi-year process. And then you may come back to it when it comes out, you're reading it again. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I think this might help somebody. And sometimes I'm like, wow, what did I disclose that? What am I thinking? My neighbor's never going to accept my cookie plate again. What's going on? And like some of the exercises and stuff, we're literally going through them. We are going it is a journey, and it's a journey that, hopefully I'll be able to go on with a lot of readers, and yeah, I'm excited. But thank you for asking about the rhythms, and, again, I'm hoping it's a movement, with the reader and not so much just like how-to guide.
That's exactly what it feels like, that invitation to move into this journey with, because I think so often we get stuck in this place where it's okay, I feel really stuck right now. And now just somebody tell me how to do the things and I'll do the things and then I'll be free. And the rest is
Mm.
history. And then we arrive at the destination and all is fine and the end. But as we all know, that's not how it works. And it's actually because we miss all of the growth in as part of the journey if that was the quick easy solution for it. And so I love that your book does read as this like invitation into and could come back and revisit, not just now I know how to do this and now I can go out and do it and then everything's that's what I love about it in particular for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard from several folks who were like, I'm giving this to my therapist. I've heard from therapists that are saying, like, I'm going to get this for every client. And I think it's not just a tool. Like you said, I think it's going to be hopefully a process that folks can go on and revisit when they need to.
Yeah, of course, especially when you're talking about someone with the belief that they're not worthy, that they're not worth anything, which and I have heard that from clients so many times. And actually, so much of any sort of negative thought pattern ends up that's where it ends up landing. And so overturning that massive false belief is doesn't happen overnight. Like you said, it takes communication, it takes setting boundaries, it takes like learning that and believing that. And I think in order to believe that, you've gotta get in the word because how could you not? And yes, it is. It's a massive, long work that we get to do.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah,
So good.
absolutely.
We talk about this is just coincidental today, seeing your email pop up that I am not like you and the lies that we tend to tell ourselves. And I think that what we talk about here all the time is like these like stories that keep us stuck, whether it's in the over drinking cycle or with unhealed trauma or whatever it is. And so I'm thinking about a listener out there who is like, but I'm not like you girls. Like, this is where I'm sitting today. And your stories, although lovely, and I can see what it looks like to be free because here are these great examples, I am not like you. And how would you encourage that listener from that standpoint?
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad you're part of my email list. So thank you for signing up. Chairs on Substack. That's where I love
It's
to
so good.
connect with people. I actually surveyed my folks and like, how do you want me to show up? Because I want to bring value to my readers. And like a lot of percentage of the folks who responded said through writing through the newsletter. I'm like, yes, because that's like my favorite thing to do. Cool. But yes, I think the title of the blog post was I'm Not Like You and Other Lies We Tell Ourselves. And I think this idea that we walk into a room and I do it. I do it. I'm not saying I don't do it, but we walk into a room and we are immediately starting to size people up. Like, you're this, we're putting people in boxes, we're categorizing people, and we're immediately looking for the differences. And I think a lot of times we do that to protect ourselves. So we can say, I'm not like you. When I'm not like you, I don't need to do what you're doing. And it's so interesting I've got that hopefully, God willing, it'll be 14 years of recovery coming up. But over the past like decade plus, witnessing what my recovery, just walking that out in my personal journey, how that has impacted other people. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, amazing, on board. I want to do that. I want what you have. I'm going to follow you and do what you're doing. But other people have really rejected because I think it's my story has made people think about their story, and it's really terrifying. It's
Mhm.
scary to think that I might have to do what this person is doing, or maybe in not the same way, but that I might have things, whether it's addiction, mental health, gambling, pornography, whatever your thing is, ice cream, that's my thing sometimes. But there's something that's getting in the way of me and my relationship with God, and I might have to do something about it. But I can tell myself that, oh, you know what? Rosé all day and oh, fun, on wine drinking is okay. You were a drug addict and like super promiscuous. So you're way different than me. Actually, the same stuff is operating inside of us in
Mm.
terms of why we're doing that, why we're trying to escape, the way that those things that we're doing separate us from God. It's all the same stuff. So I think when we can start understanding that we're human, doesn't matter what that thing out there is, I think we can really come to a place of new healing and understanding. When I write in my article, I really believe if we can start telling our stories and connecting more on a human level and breaking down those walls, we can change the world. And I know that's a really weighty statement and it seems a little like Wonder Woman-ish. I'm not saying I can change the world. I'm saying collectively, when we can be vulnerable and human together and see our similarities and not our differences, something amazing can happen. And I hope that, and I pray that for every single listener. Because if it's a mom sitting on her couch, like counting down until it's noon or 5 or whatever your rule is, saying, yes, and I connect with some of this, but I'm also different. My prayer is that woman understands that maybe she's not as different as she thinks she is. And maybe trying something new is going to be worth the risk of doing that.
So
That's
good.
so good, babe. I just love that so much. It's so good. And also to the same point, I feel like, yes, I was like the rose all day girl and all of that stuff. But I also got to a point where I could see easily how it could get worse, right?
Yeah.
I can see now, I can empathize and I can have compassion for the person that is further along in the addiction process because it makes so much sense to me how you get there having been through it, right? It's just you keep believing that I am not worthy message in your head and you keep, as you said, differentiating yourself. And so I love that so much. So good.
Responding to the heartfelt request from you, our wonderful, wonderful listeners, for a deeper sense of community, we are so excited to introduce y'all to the But Jesus Drink Wine community. Get ready to be part of an exclusive experience where you'll join a sisterhood of kindred spirits on a transformative journey of faith, sobriety, and personal growth. You'll gain access to our private community, a place where deep connections can flourish among women who share your aspirations of strengthening faith in Christ and breaking free from alcohol. But wait, there's more. We'll host regular connection calls to facilitate fellowship with like-minded gals, no matter where you stand on your alcohol or faith journey. Whether you're seasoned or just curious, you are very warmly welcomed here. Prepare to be inspired by guest expert sessions and engaging Q&As that explore the essential topics for your sobriety, faith, and holistic wellness journey. Don't miss out on securing your spot. Click the link in the show notes to learn more. We can't wait to see your beautiful face in the But Jesus Drank Wine community. I think that's why we feel so passionate about sharing on a podcast other women's stories, and because they all are different and they can look different ways. What we always talk about here is that we just got off of that hamster wheel maybe before. To your point, Christy, like being able to see what could happen when you're using an addictive substance in any form. At some point, it takes up more and more space, and so to your passion, Caroline, too, about we can change the world if we're coming together and collectively having the vulnerability, the courage, the connection through community that you also talk about in the book so beautifully. We can change the world with that when our stories and go into it with a mindset of not, oh, I'm so different or you're so different. And so that can't work for me or it doesn't relate to me. Like, is there anything here, God, that you want me to see in this person's story that can help me where I am feeling stuck right now? Or that I'm not even, or I'm afraid to look at. Or I'm afraid. I know I have these tight rules around when I can and can't drink wine, but is there something here that you want me to see, God, that will help me ultimately grow, keep that connection to you and not grow further away? So good.
I love what you all are doing. I think it's part of that breaking down the stigma and breaking down those barriers and being vocal and visible about issues like alcoholism and addiction. I know it's not easy, but I think it's so important. And I'm so glad women like you are being bold and bringing this out into the open. Part of why I'm so excited about Christy's book coming out too on the 24th of September, because it's so important to have these conversations and tools for women to be able to say, and all folks to be able to say, I want to live a different way. I'm going to choose healing. And then guides like both of yourselves who are like, okay, let me show you how to do that. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And I'm just so glad we got connected and that you answered my email. I like had such a fangirl moment. I'm like, oh, it's for the podcast. We're going to come. I'm so like collected on the meeting maybe, but no, inside I'm like, you're really awesome. So,
Oh, it's right back
Special.
at you, right
oh,
back at you. Can we talk a little bit about why this whole subject topic is so important for women and why it's different for women, trauma and addiction?
yeah. Again, there's probably folks who have a lot more degrees behind their name that can speak more to this. But what I do know, just from the research, my personal story, women I've worked with, certainly you both have alluded to the women that you're working with as well. That connection is so significant. I actually just wrote an op-ed with Christina Dent, also part of this fun Christian writers group we're doing. But she works for an organization called End It for Good. And the op-ed was all about women who are actually being incarcerated for substance use issues. And did you all know in the United States, women are the top demographic that are being imprisoned at like rates that are 800 to 900 times what they were like 10 years ago. So women
Wow.
and researchers are pointing to stigma being a huge piece of that because we are caregivers, we're mothers. And so when we're
Mm.
struggling with these issues, it's like people are like, oh my gosh, she's doing that. Or the women that I'm working with were connected with in Eastern Tennessee. So many of them are actually facing legal ramifications like losing parental rights. This isn't just your kids going into foster care. Which is not just, that's very hard too, but this is literally they're being court mandated to sign off on their rights as parents, meaning basically, according to the law, they were never mothers. These
Oh
children.
my gosh.
And this is the reality of what's going on because of the significant stigma that women are facing. So not only do we have women experiencing horribly hard things, but women who are then using substances, becoming addicted, having these consequences that may feel like for us, I don't know where you all are living, but that life, incarceration, all of that feels very far away from me. Um, but it's not that far away. It is happening right outside in our small town community. It's happening all over the United States. So this is a much bigger issue, I think, too. And so seeing it from an advocacy lens and seeing the impact that stigma is really having right now. There's actually some great research coming out of the UK too around this, women and stigma related to substance use issues. So anyways, I encourage folks to get educated, especially if you're feeling like, oh, maybe you don't identify as having an issue with alcohol or you have a family member, but you have a heart for this and you have a heart for helping women. Get educated about the issues and what's really going on because the issue is a lot bigger than what is just maybe happening in our living rooms.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. I think about how true that and how I can just picture like Don Draper and drinking and smoking from that series and like how normalized for men that's part of business and that's part of what they do. And then how, yeah, just our vision of what mothers and what we do, and then how that stigma becomes it. I'm just like kind of processing that through and seeing how, yeah. And that's,
What? Mhm.
yeah, so unfortunate.
Well, and that's why we've talked about shame so much on this podcast, right?
Yeah.
And we've had Mead's best friend, Dr. Kurt Thompson, on here to talk about it, and just how that I think is why and how drinking and or whatever substance use affects us so differently because it holds the stigma and it holds then the shame, and then the shame keeps us further stuck in the hamster wheel of more stuff. And so, yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's why we all have this heart, right? For because we've been there and we know what that feels like. And I hope that we all are offering hope to anybody that's listening that it doesn't have to be like that. And as you said, as we started with, that that healing is a choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think all of this really also points back to, like I mentioned, this goes beyond our living rooms. And so if you're struggling, if a listener's struggling with alcohol or whatever the issue is, addressing that, making that choice for healing doesn't only impact ourselves, it impacts our families, our children, and ultimately it can impact our communities. In other women, we can be a light to show that there is another way. We don't have to live in darkness. We don't have to live our lives crippled by and weighted down by shame. We can live free from these things and show other women that hope is possible. Like you said, it feels like a weighty calling, but oh, what an awesome one. What an awesome
Yeah.
thing that God can use something like these challenges in such a beautiful, incredible way. And as it says in scripture, the fields are ready. We need workers in the harvest field now. There are women out here that need you to choose healing today, and they're waiting for you.
I love that.
Amen.
Amen. Can you please give our dear listeners, our dear readers, a tiny new action that they can take? And it can totally be just go on Amazon right now and pre order the book, but you should do that anyways. But
I was
what's
gonna say
something
that's my tiny Tina for everybody is pre-order Caroline's book because
yeah.
I have just it's been such a pleasure to just walk through it and it's helping me. It's healing me in ways that I didn't know were still available. So yeah.
So I appreciate that. Yes, of course, get the book. And I love to say too, would you get the book for someone in your life? So maybe I
Mm,
love it when people say, oh, I ordered the book and put it in our church library or gave it
mm.
to a neighbor or to a friend. And I also say this, my husband's going to he was always like, you got to sell the books. But I do have free digital if anyone is, I would love a book, but it's not accessible for me right now. Find me online and email me, and I will get you a copy. And this is how much I believe that this book needs to get out there. And I would also say, if a, I don't know if it's a tiny action, but I want to challenge readers or listeners. If you're feeling moved at all by anything in the last 45-minute conversation, if you're feeling moved to take an action, maybe that's related to your substance use or some other thing, coping strategy that you're using, will you tell someone about that? Can you just bring someone into what's going on in your mind right now about that? Because I think sometimes we have these sparks where we're like, oh, I need to do this, or I really should do this, but we sit with it and it stays in our head and we don't get it out. No one ever knows about it. No one
Mhm.
can support us through that. It doesn't become as real because it stays up here in our mind. So I'd encourage you to find someone you trust and tell them that thing that's going on in your mind right now.
That is so good. I never thought about anything less than the morning I decided to call my best
Mm.
girlfriend and say, I'm drinking more than I want to be drinking. And that would have been something I thought long and hard about all the things I did in a way, but I never thought about anything less. It was like, I've got to get this out to somebody because
Mhm.
I've been spinning it for so long. So that is so good. Love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, we can
So
stop spinning on our own. That's such a gift, isn't it?
Yeah. Such a gift. Oh, thank you, babe. Can you please tell everyone where they can find you as well?
Absolutely. So, Circle of Chairs on Substack and Circle of Chairs, if those of us in recovery may or may not know, a lot of times we come into a room that is a circle of open chairs, and it's a place where we can be vulnerable and share and tell our stories. And I want my newsletter to be that for folks. And I also have a storytelling platform for called Circle of Chairs. So, if you can just Google that as well, where you can share your own story. So, I love to highlight other women's stories of recovery and healing, and CarolineBeidler.com is where I also hang out. So I look forward to connecting with you all.
That's so cool. I didn't know that you did that, the platform for other gals to share too. That's so awesome. That's so neat. So what does that look like? Is it like a blog format or a Substack format, or what does it look like?
I have the Substack newsletter and then it's like a website kind of blog.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm hoping to expand that at some point. There's only so much time in the day. So as you both
don't
know.
we know? Yes. Yeah. Well, y'all go get the book. You are not your trauma. So good. Such a blessing. It's blessed me. It's going to bless many others. Thank you, Caroline, for your time today and your amazing work.
Oh, thank you both. It's been a joy and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Bye, friends.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. You can find all of our episodes at butjesusdrinkwine.com, and be sure to follow us over on Instagram, Love Life Sober, and I'm Not Sober, I'm Free.
To learn more about what we do, you can visit our websites, meethollandshirley.com and lovelifesober.com.
Take a screenshot of this podcast and share it with a friend or two.
And don't forget to subscribe to our pod so you don't have to worry about missing a single episode. And if you love what we're doing, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify.
This helps more women who are feeling stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle find hope and encouragement.
Thanks, ladies. We so appreciate you, and we'll see you next Monday.